Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from Rouse IAS.
All those who are scoring 90 plus marks in the prelims examination have a very strong chance to clear the prelims. Now you should start preparing for the coming mains examination without any confusion. Rouse IAS has launched General Studies Mains Test Series and Quality Improvement Program for Mains 2020. The goals of the program are: first, revision of the most important themes from the perspective of mains examination. For this, there will be Mains Compass, which are subject-wise compilations, and Quality Improvement Program classroom discussions. Second, fine-tuning of answer writing approach through rigorous testing, sample answers, evaluation and personal mentorship from the teachers. Third, simulation of exam-like testing through tests which will help you understand the art and science of answer writing along with honing your time management skills. The new batch is starting from 16th of October, so enroll now and better your chances to clear the mains examination. The link to enroll for this program and its detail are given in the description of the video.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we are going to discuss Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 13th of October 2020. The articles which we are going to discuss are displayed on the screen. Let us now begin the discussion. Before jumping into the discussion, we have few statements in the form of true and false statements, and you have to yourself find out through this discussion whether they are true or false, although the answers are given towards the end of the discussion. Statement 1 is: electricity is a central subject at entry 32 in list 1 of the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India. Electricity generation from nuclear source is more than from renewable sources. Congress party garnered more than 50% of the votes in the first general elections. The term Congress system was coined by Rajni Kothari. Graded response action plan works only as an emergency measure. The solar power tariff are determined by the Solar Energy Corporation of India. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences jointly to Paul R. Milgrom and Robert B. Wilson for improvement to auction theory and inventions of new auction format. This news article appears as a lead on page number 6. Federalism, now a partisan internal dialogue. This news article talks about various steps and legislations enacted by the current central government and its impact on our federal structure, and this has been discussed in our DNS various times. For example, the introduction of GST and its impact on overall revenues of the states. After that, COVID-19 pandemic and the way central government has tried to resolve the issue. Also, the government has introduced 3 agricultural bills which have also impacted deeply the federal structure. All these issues and their implications on our federal structure have already been discussed in our DNS. But a very important term used by the author in this particular article needs a special discussion, and that is Congress system. Now, Congress system is not a common term. It is a very specific term given by political scientist Rajni Kothari, which denotes not only the dominance of the Congress in the initial 20 years after independence of India, and also the ability of the Congress to absorb all factional pressures and create a grand national synthesis. Now you might wonder, why is it important for us to know this? Now in GS1 syllabus of UPSC mains examination, there is a line of syllabus which says modern Indian history from about the middle of 18th century until the present, significant events, personalities and issues. Also, post-independence consolidation and reorganization within the country forms the part of GS1, and hence it is important for us to understand what was the kind of dominance which the Congress party exhibited over overall political system in our country in the initial 20 to 30 years after independence, and what were the causes behind it which led to such a dominance. So before anything, let us first understand the kind of dominance which the Congress party had. And for that, we will have to first analyze an image taken from NCERT class 12th political science book. There is a map of India on which we'll come later, but first we will analyze the bar graphs given on the image. They show the results of 3 consecutive elections, 1952 elections, 57 and 62 elections. Now, the number of seats in the first, second and third Lok Sabha were 489, 494 and 494 respectively. So they were not the current numbers. And if you analyze the results, Congress obtained 364 seats in the first Lok Sabha, 371 in the second and 361 in the third. The numerals might not be clear to you for the low resolution of the image, but you can surely see the tall tower of Congress after each election results, and rest are the opposition parties. So clearly, Congress had a very dominant presence in overall Lok Sabha in initial 15 to 20 years. But what about the states? So for that, we have a map over there, and you can see all the states ruled by Congress from 1952 to 1967 marked in yellow color. And you can see that almost all of India, even at state level, was being controlled by the Congress party. Also, none of the opposition parties could even win 1/10 of the number of the seats won by Congress. So this is the kind of dominance we are talking about politically when we talk about Congress dominance or Congress system. So obviously, a question in the mains examination can be asked about the causes behind the Congress dominance. Now, this dominance was just not unique in terms of numbers. It was also in the way these numbers were achieved. Now, through your general awareness, you must be knowing that India is not the only country to have experienced the dominance of one country. If you look around the world, you will find many other examples where single party has dominated. But there is a crucial difference between that kind of dominance and Congress dominance of Indian political system. Because in the rest of the cases, the dominance of one party was ensured by compromising democracy. For example, in some countries, especially the communist countries, for example China, Cuba, the constitution permits only a single party to contest and win the elections. So to answer the question, was India the only example? The answer is obviously no. So what is unique about India, or what distinguishes the dominance of Congress party in India from all these cases? That it happened under totally democratic conditions in our country and no compromise was made on democracy. Now you should understand that for democratic setup to function completely, you need to have at least two things. First, the elections should be conducted in a free and fair manner, and for that you need an independent constitutional election commission, and of course you need a multi-party system. And if you compare all those countries with a single party dominance, you see that India indeed was only example, and hence we have to replace no with a yes. India was the only example where under a fully democratic functioning setup under free and fair elections in which many parties were allowed to contest elections, a single party could maintain its dominance, and hence it becomes important for us to discuss the causes behind such a dominance. And hence now we will discuss the causes. And first and foremost cause behind such a massive victories of Congress in our political system can be attributed to our electoral system, which is first past the post system. So the extent of the victory of the Congress was artificially boosted by our electoral system. The Congress won 3 out of every 4 seats, but actually it did not get even half of the votes. If you analyze the vote patterns, in 1952, for example, the Congress obtained only 45% of the total valid votes, but it managed to win 74% of the total seats. So this was for Congress, whereas if you see the Socialist Party, which was the second largest party in terms of the votes, secured more than 10% of the overall votes across the country, but it could not even win 3% of the overall seats. So in this kind of system of election that has been adopted in our country, the party that gets more votes than others tends to get much more than its proportional share. And that is exactly what worked in favor of the Congress. If we add up the votes of all the non-Congress candidates, it was more than the votes of the Congress. But the non-Congress votes were divided between different rival parties and candidates. So the Congress was still way ahead of the opposition and managed to win. So that is the reason number one. But that cannot be the complete reason. For in order to garner 45% of the overall votes, you need a huge popularity as well as credibility. And the reasons behind those are that the roots of this extraordinary success of the Congress party go back to the legacy of the freedom struggle. Congress was seen as inheritor of the national movement. Many leaders who were in the forefront of that struggle were now contesting elections as Congress candidates. So if people with such national repute and image become candidates in Lok Sabha elections, obviously people are going to vote for them, right? And apart from that, another important reason is that by the time of independence, the Congress was already a very well organized party. And by the time other parties could even think of a strategy, the Congress had already started its campaign. So you can say that it had a first mover advantage, or it had a head start which no other party had. In fact, many other parties were formed only around independence. So by the time of independence, the Congress party had not only spread across the length and breadth of the country, but also had an organizational network down to the local level, which earlier was being utilized for freedom struggle. And just after the independence, the same organization and machinery until the local level was put to use for national election, and hence that can be called as second important reason behind massive dominance of Congress in our political system. There are other important and significant reasons as well, and those we are going to discuss now, and that is the nature of the Congress as a social coalition as well as ideological coalition, and we'll understand why the character of the Congress as a coalition played a major role in its dominance. Now if you see, society is not a homogeneous entity. It consists of a lot of social groups. Some are peasants, whereas others, very few, are industrialists. Some people live in villages where others are urban dwellers. Similarly, there is caste system in our country as well as religion also plays a major role. So our society consists of various kinds of social groups. And one way to win elections is to appeal to a majority of social groups. The more social groups agree to a party's programs and agenda, higher are the chances of that party winning. Now if you see the evolution of the Congress, it originated in 1885 as a pressure group for the newly educated professional and commercial classes, and 70 years later it became a mass movement. So you can say that Congress began as a party dominated by English speaking upper caste, upper middle class or urban elites, but with every civil disobedience movement it launched, its social base widened. Gradually, it started including villagers, peasants, women into its fold, and finally, at the time of independence, it brought together diverse groups whose interests were often contradictory. For example, the interests of peasants and industrialists as well as workers are contradictory to each other, but they all found place in the programs and agenda of Congress party. Similarly, villagers as well as urban dwellers. And hence, by the time 1950 came, Congress party was like a rainbow-like social coalition in which all the social groups, or you can say majority of social groups, found their place, their voice inside the party. So the Congress consisted of prominent peasant leaders as well as it consisted of prominent industrialists. So that can be thought of as a third important reason. But there is another reason, and that is that Congress acted as an ideological coalition as well, because you should understand that politics is governed by ideologies. Most parties are based on ideologies, at least in principle or in paper, to which they profess their utmost allegiance. And if you analyze the Congress at the time of independence, it was not just the social coalition, it was also an ideological coalition. And it accommodated diverse ideologies. And very rarely do you find a political party accommodating both revolutionaries as well as pacifists. So revolutionaries are people who either participate or advocate a revolution, whereas a pacifist is a person who believes that war and violence are unjustified, whatever may be the ends. Similarly, both radicals as well as conservatives found their places inside the Congress. So the Congress was a platform for numerous groups, interests, and even political parties to take part in the national movement. Now you should not wonder that in pre-independence days, many organizations and parties with their own constitution and organizational structure were allowed to exist within the Congress. Some of these, like Congress Socialist Party, later separated from the Congress and became an opposition, and that is what gave Congress a party a coalition-like character. So we have discussed four causes behind the dominance of the Congress. Now what it did and how it led to win of Congress in three consecutive elections can be summarized in two main points. Now the coalition-like character of the Congress gave it an unusual strength. Now you know that a coalition accommodates all those who join it, and therefore it has to avoid any extreme position on almost all the matters, and also it has to strike a balance between two conflicting or contradicting positions. So for example, if you have both industrialists as well as farmers in a party, your party cannot be either propagating complete agricultural reforms or communism, neither it will talk about complete handover of the economy to the private sector, and hence the balance will be maintained because two pressure groups exist inside your own party. So compromise and inclusiveness are the hallmarks of a coalition, and hence you can appease to almost all the groups, whether ideological or social, into your country. And also this kind of coalition nature of Congress put the opposition in a difficulty, because anything that the opposition wanted to say would also find a place in the program and ideology of the Congress. So if there is a party which is advocating socialism, Congress already had socialists. Similarly, if a party is propagating capitalism, party already had capitalists. And that is why even if a group was not happy with the position of the party, it would remain inside the party and fight other groups rather than leaving the party and becoming an opposition member. And that is what has famously been called by Rajni Kothari as the Congress system. So from the perspective of mains examination, it is very important for you to understand the causes, because it can be directly asked in the mains either as a 10 or a 15 marker. Let's now move on to the next news. Towards Cleaner Air in Delhi appears on page number 7. So this is that time of year when the Delhi pollution starts to appear in the newspaper. Every year in the winters especially, the pollution level in Delhi skyrockets because of various reasons, and hence it becomes important for us to understand the causes behind Delhi air pollution, the government initiatives, what are the issues, and finally how we can resolve those issues. So every year during winters, National Capital Region experiences severe levels of pollution on air quality index. And so it is important for us to understand the causes, and we have segregated the causes into the causes which are continuous, which are in the background throughout the year. Some causes are seasonal, which appear mainly during winter time and exacerbate the overall situation of pollution, and some are geographic factors. Starting with the continuous causes, the causes which are there throughout the year. And number one is the vehicular emissions. The Central Pollution Control Board and the National Environment Engineering Research Institute have declared vehicular emission as a major contributor to Delhi's increasing air pollution. According to their estimates, vehicular emissions have contributed around 40% in overall pollution of Delhi NCR region. Then the next factor which is there throughout the year, every day contributes to pollution, is the construction sector or the construction works being carried out on a large scale, especially in the areas surrounding Delhi or in the satellite towns like Noida, Gurgaon, Faridabad. Large scale construction in Delhi NCR is major culprit that is increasing not so much of gaseous pollution but the particulate matter pollution. Then of course, another source is from coal burning in power plants as well as burning of the garbage. So these are the sources which are continuous emissions taking place every day. But the situation worsens during winter. Why? Because there are certain seasonal factors working behind the scenes. And the most important of them is stubble burning. Stubble burning in Punjab, Rajasthan and Haryana is blamed for causing a thick blanket of smog in Delhi during winters. So stubble burning, for all those who don't know, is an act of setting fire to crop residue to remove them from the field to sow the next crop. So we have a Kharif season ending in some time from now, and after that the Rabi crops shall be planted. And in between Kharif and Rabi, they get a very small period of time, maybe less than 2 weeks, within which they have to get rid of the residue of the Kharif crop. So the farmers in the northwestern region of our country have to move in a very short interval, and if they are late due to short winters these days, they might face considerable losses. Therefore, for them, burning is the cheapest and the fastest way to get rid of the stubble, and that is why they pursue the stubble burning, which ultimately becomes problem for a Delhi NCR region. Also, firecrackers contribute significantly to the pollution. Although it may not be the top reason for air pollution, but it definitely contributes to the build-up and the worsening, especially during the winter season. And then finally comes the geographic reason. And in that, the location and the topography of the Delhi plays a special role. Delhi lies in landlocked Indo-Gangetic region, which does not have a geographic advantage that eastern and the western or the southern parts of the country have. There is no breeze to disperse the concentrated pollutants. And the special wind circulation during winter helps in the concentration of the pollution over Delhi NCR region. And in some cases, for example in 2017, dust storm from Gulf countries was also involved behind the worsening of the situation. So during the smog in the year 2017, the dust storm from the Gulf countries worsened already bad air condition in Delhi. So these are the causes, and it's not like the government has not taken any step. The government indeed has taken a lot of steps to counter air pollution in Delhi NCR region. So first and foremost is the launch of National Clean Air Program, a nationwide pollution control initiative launched by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change to cut the concentration of particulate matter by 20 to 30% by 2022. So it is specifically targeted to reduce the particulate matter contribution. Then Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has also notified environmental norms to reduce the emissions of PM10, sulfur dioxide and oxides of nitrogen emerging from thermal power plants, especially in Delhi NCR region. Then Clean Air India initiative was launched to curb air pollution in Indian cities by promoting partnership between Indian startups and Dutch companies and build a network of entrepreneurs working on business solutions for cleaner air. Then of course we have graded response action plan, which is going to kick in from October 15. So this plan was approved by Supreme Court in 2016, and this works as an emergency measure. So this is not in place throughout the year. Only when the pollution level exceeds a certain limit, GRAP kicks in. As such, the plan does not include actions by various state governments to be taken throughout the year to tackle industrial, vehicular and combustion emissions. The plan is incremental in nature. Therefore, when the air quality moves from poor to very poor, the measures listed under both the sections have to be followed. Then certain extremely polluting substances have been banned. For example, the Supreme Court banned the use of furnace oil and pet coke in Haryana, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. And the burning of biomass has already been banned. The steps to reduce vehicular emission was reflected in the step taken by the central government, in which we directly moved to BS6 standards from BS4, skipping BS5 altogether. So these are holistic set of measures which have been taken by the government. But of course, there are some issues because of which the overall situation of air pollution in Delhi is not being resolved. And one of the most important reason is that in India, legislations have never considered health as a priority area in planning while framing regulations for combating air pollution. Whereas the most adverse impacts of air pollution is felt on the health of the residents, but nowhere in the Pollution Acts you will find mention of health. Then various boards and authorities which have been created, for example Central Pollution Control Board, are presently unable to fulfill their mandate as watchdogs against polluters because they do not have sufficient powers. And then comes an important concept of pollution liability. So pollution liability is like a damages which can be claimed by the residents against the major polluters. And in India, the concept of pollution liability does not exist. And finally comes a major issue of existence of multiple authorities. Since the causes of pollution are multifold and hence several agencies and ministries are involved in the management of pollution. but it leads to the obfuscation of overall accountability mechanism. If there are multiple authorities functioning in a particular area, it is very difficult to pinpoint the responsibility, because of which either all are accountable or none are accountable, and that creates a big problem in the management of air pollution. So in the mains examination, you have to end your answer with a way forward. Of course, it depends on the kind of question, but even if it doesn't ask, it is a good idea to mention it in 1 or 2 lines. So first and foremost, we need a robust and reliable weather forecasting system. There is a great and a dire need for a better weather forecast so that agencies have an advance notice of the measures that need to be taken. For example, you should be well aware of the fact that how many stubbles are burning in Punjab, Haryana or in UP, or you should know about the path of the dust storm coming from the Gulf region. As in developed countries where smog alert systems are in place, a robust and a reliable weather forecasting system is essential for a proper action. Then, of course, we need a comprehensive road transport policy whereby promotion of public transport is needed. Several studies have shown that public transport provide more than 65% of the Delhi's commuting needs, but occupies less than 5% of the road space. And hence, along with this, some disincentives can be given as far as purchasing of private vehicles are concerned. Some of the example would be increasing the road taxes, or many times increasing the parking fee, which ultimately demotivate the people to purchase private vehicles or use them. Then, of course, the time has come to take punitive measures for polluting industries. They cannot just create negative externalities and go without paying it back. We have to be stricter and create clearly defined accountabilities with clearly defined punitive measures. Then, of course, we need to take stubble burning and its management very seriously. And one of the most efficient technology to counter crop burning at the moment is Happy Seeder machine, which is a tool mounted on a tractor that not only cuts and uproots the stubble, but can also drill wheat seeds in the soil that have just been cleared up. And it is a very effective machinery, and the government is also providing incentives to the farmers of this region to buy the Happy Seeder. Then we need to ramp up the municipal level management of urban bodies. Urban planning should be long term, which should give enough space for non-motorized transport like cycling and walking in order to incentivize them. So this is the whole spectrum of the issue of Delhi's air pollution. Let's now move on to the next news. This next news item appears on page number 1. Government moves to spur demand. Hoping to spur fresh demand of about 1 lakh crore in the second half of the year, Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman unveiled a mini stimulus of sorts, comprising incentives for government and public sector employees to spend more on consumer durables and services. Also, government has announced interest-free loans for the states as well. The stimulus package is expected to increase the overall demand in the economy by 1 lakh crore. Before going into the actual announcement by the government, let us first understand the rationale for the package. Now, from the basics of economy or the macroeconomy, we should understand that there are 4 drivers of an economy: consumption expenditure, investment, government expenditure, and net exports, which is exports minus imports. So these are the factors which drive the demand and ultimately growth in an economy. Now, in case of India, consumption expenditure is the major driver, accounting for around 60% of India's GDP. However, the loss of jobs accompanied by uncertainty due to economic slowdown has led to decline in consumption expenditure. This, in a way, has the potential to further exacerbate the economic slowdown. For example, according to RBI's monthly consumption expenditure survey, the consumer sentiment within India has been on a constant decline. So if consumers are optimistic about the current and future economic state of the country, then they would spend more money, leading to an increase in the GDP. On the other hand, if the consumer confidence is low, this can lead to decrease in the consumption expenditure and hence impacts the GDP growth rate. The announcement made by the finance minister yesterday on one hand deal with consumer spending, which will increase the consumption expenditure. On the other hand, they will also enhance the investment through making sure that the states do not compromise on their capital expenditures. Let us have a look at the announcements. Let us first discuss the steps taken by the Finance Ministry yesterday to enhance the consumer spending in our economy. So there are two sets of such announcements. First is the Leave Travel Concession Cash Voucher Scheme and Special Festival Advance Scheme. So we all know that central government employees get LTC in a block of 4 years in which air or rail fare as per the scale or entitlement is reimbursed, and in addition leave encashment of 10 days is paid. So this is a special benefit which the employees of central government get. Every 4 years, central government employees with their dependent family can visit any place in our country, and the travel allowance is reimbursed depending upon the rank they are in. But due to COVID-19, employees are not in a position to avail LTC in the current block of 2018 to 21 because people are simply not going anywhere, and hence this has put a lot of toll on tourism industry. Government wants the central government employees to spend the money, but if they are not traveling, they will not spend the money because there is a condition attached. Only if you travel, you will get the money back. And hence, the government has decided to give cash payment in lieu or in place of one LTC during 2018 to 21. So the government said that we provided you a facility that you can go anywhere in our country and get it reimbursed. But since you are not going, still you can spend that money, and hence the government has decided to cash in place of the visit, which includes full payment on leave encashment, payment of fare in 3 flat rate slabs depending on the class of entitlement, and the fare payment will be tax free. So all the money which is credited into the account of the employee will not be taxed. The only condition is that an employee opting for this scheme will be required to buy goods or services worth 3 times the fare and 1 time leave encashment before 31st March 2021. So a central government employee can buy anything and get it reimbursed from the central government. So it is expected that instead of going somewhere, the central government employees are going to buy a lot of consumer durables, acting as a big boost to the demand as well as the growth of the economy. And the second part of the step is Special Festival Advance Scheme, which is a one-time measure to stimulate the demand. All central government employees can now get an interest-free advance of 10,000 rupees to be spent by, again, 31st March 2021. And the festival will be of their choice. Of course, they have to return it, but the government is not going to charge any interest on it. So this set of incentive is going to work for increasing the consumption expenditure, because this sum of money will be utilized by the employees of the central government to buy the products, increase the consumption, and hence boost the economy. But what about the investment? For that, the government has come up with 2 sets of announcements. First is a special assistance to states, and also the government has enhanced the budget provisions. We all know that the money spent on infrastructure and asset creation, which is capital expenditure, has a multiplier effect on the economy. It not only improves current GDP but also the future GDP. The government wants to give a new thrust to capital expenditure of both states and center. And hence, the central government is issuing a special interest-free 50-year loan to states of rupees 12,000 crore for capital expenditure. It has 2 parts to it. In part 1, 200 crore each for 8 northeastern states, which amounts to 1600 crores, 450 crore each for Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, and in the part 2 of this scheme, 7500 crore for remaining of the states as per 15th Finance Commission devolution plan. Now the government has a set of conditions that, again, just like consumer expenditure, all this sum of money has to be spent before 31st of March 2021, and it can be used for new or ongoing capital projects which need fund or which need to be started. Apart from this, an additional budget of rupees 25,000 crore in addition to 4.13 lakh crore given in Union Budget 2020 is being provided for capital expenditure on roads, defense, water supply, urban development, and domestically produced capital equipment. It is expected that these 2 measures will boost consumer expenditure as well as investment in the economy in the year which has been devastated by COVID pandemic. This next article is about the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences which was awarded yesterday, which has been won by two American economists. So the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences jointly to Paul R. Milgrom and Robert B. Wilson for improvement to auction theory and inventions of new auctions format. These Nobel laureates have studied how auctions work and accordingly designed new auction formats for goods and services such as allocation of telecom spectrum, mining licenses, and etc. Their discovery have benefited sellers, buyers, and taxpayers around the world. So let us understand auction theory. The Nobel laureates have designed the auction theory through which they have sought to study various aspects of auctions such as how auctions are designed, what rules govern them, how bidders behave, and what outcomes are achieved. So if you have to understand, usually the simplest form of auction which is normally used across the world is highest open bidder, wherein the highest bidder is awarded the property. However, over a period of time, with the advent of privatization, a large number of goods and services need to be auctioned by the government to the private sector. And there, the things becomes tricky. For instance, telecom spectrum, mining leases, carbon emission credits, etc. The auctioning of these new age goods and services need to be different as compared to traditional open bidder system, which is because of the fact due to competing interests of the private sector and government. Because the government needs to take care of the large public goals, the private sector takes into account the profit motive, and let us understand how. Let's take the example of dilemma before the government for the auctioning of telecom spectrum. The government could design auction in two different ways with different objectives. So option 1 in front of the government is to carry out auction to maximize revenue. So the government will open the spectrum for the auction, and whoever pays the highest amount of money, the spectrum is there. However, here the telecom operator would have to pay higher fee to the government. The telecom operator would then pass on the higher fee to the customers, thus making the telecom services unaffordable to the poor sections of the society. And the benefits of the telecom sector would be limited only to the upper strata. Whereas, second option is to carry out auction to make telecom services affordable to everyone. However, this would lead to loss of revenue to the government. So these are the dilemma in front of the government. Now, as far as the contributions of these Nobel laureates are concerned, both the Nobel laureates have designed new auction formats in order to streamline the process of auction and make it easier for the government to conduct auctions of different goods and services. These new auction formats have immensely benefited the government, private sector, as well as taxpayers. Although what format they have suggested, what is their method, is beyond the purview of UPSC examination. Next news item appears on page number 5. COVID-19 hospitals unaffected amid power outage in Mumbai. So there was a huge power outage in Mumbai yesterday, which is quite a rare phenomena for a city like Mumbai. And hence an article appears on page number 5. Now in this regard, it is important to know few things about power sector in our country with respect to prelims examination. With reference to the solar power production in India, consider the following statements was a question asked in 2018. Statement 1 was, India is the third largest in the world in manufacture of silicon wafers used in the photovoltaic units. Now this statement is incorrect because only modules and cells are made in India with imported material. The second statement was the solar power tariffs are determined by Solar Energy Corporation of India. This statement is also incorrect. Solar Energy Corporation of India is a CPSU under the administrative control of Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Solar tariffs are determined either through the regulations of Central Electricity Regulatory Commission or State Electricity Regulatory Commission or through competitive bidding and not by SECI. And hence the right answer was neither one nor two, that is D. Let us discuss few things about electricity generation in India. Electricity is a concurrent subject at entry 38 in list 3 of the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India, and hence both state as well as central government has the power to regulate electricity. The Ministry of Power is primarily responsible for the development of electrical energy in the country. And the primary legislation is known by the name of Electricity Act 2003 and Energy Conservation Act 2001, which is the responsibility of this particular industry. From the perspective of prelims examination, it is important for us to know about the contribution of various kinds of electricity generation in the overall energy production of our country. So we know that there are various ways through which energy or the electricity can be produced. For example, coal, gas or even diesel. Also we have hydroelectricity, nuclear power plants as well as renewable energy sources. And it is important to keep in mind that coal contributes highest to the overall production of energy. Of course, it is more than 50% of the overall electricity. So more than 50% of the electricity which India produces is produced through the burning of the coal, and overall contribution of the thermal power plants is around 62%. So there are other ways through which thermal power plants operate as well, which are lignite operated, gas based and diesel based. After the thermal power plant comes the contribution of new and renewable energy resources like wind and solar. After that comes hydrothermal power plants, and finally the least contribution is from nuclear power sources. Electricity generation in India can be done by both government as well as the private sector. And if we talk about the contribution of center, state and private sector, the central sector contributes 25% of the overall electricity generation, whereas around similar 27% is contributed through state governments, and majority of the electricity being produced in our country is from the private sector. It is important to keep in mind that overall current installed and functioning electricity generation capacity in our country is around 372 gigawatts or 3,72,000 megawatts. The article Gene Editing, the Good First and Then the Worries appears on page number 6. Now this article has already been extensively discussed various times by both Naved sir as well as Faizan sir. For example, as latest as day before yesterday on 11th of October 2020, Naved sir discussed the gene editing technique called CRISPR-Cas9, what role do CRISPR-Cas9 genetic scissors play and what are its applications, and most of the points appearing in the newspaper today were discussed by both of them, and hence we are choosing to skip this particular discussion.